what we're seeing is this dramatic opportunity within the marketplace and within IT for change, for disruption, and for customers to try and figure it all out. So if me as a product guy sitting in front of you, I'd love to be on your side right now. I'd love to be an integrator because customers, I don't know about your customers, but our customers are confused. Our customers are confused, and they're scared, and they're overworked. That just means opportunity. And as an integrator, the worst thing that I think you could resell is something that just works as advertised, right? Or isn't, or is just a cookie cutter thing, right? It's good that it works as advertised. But a cookie cutter solution doesn't require any services. If it doesn't require any services, you're not making as much money on it. So one of the other areas that I find that people aren't talking so much about is this thing called a disaggregation of the application, right? That's what we're calling it right now. And essentially, you know, if you look back and you look at how applications or programs were written, they were written as these big monolithic entities, right, in the past. That's how they were written. And you go off and you buy a server that was specifically built to deploy that application. And it was a vertical stack, and there was no real movement that was possible. All you did was build that application, and it lived in a silo. And when you wanted to increase the processing capability of that application, you buy a bigger server. And that's how you built it, right? Well, it turns out that applications aren't built like that anymore. Applications are modular. They're component-based, right? If you want an application now to run faster, you need to have communications between the modules of that application. So you might have a web front end, you might have a database back end, you might have some middleware running on an SOA bus, but these are component in nature. So to make them go faster, the communications are really important to go between the modular applications. And you layer in virtualization on top of that, and all of a sudden the VMs are all distributed. That communication between the VMs and those components within the application when it's virtualized, it's a whole different way that people are writing applications. This is important because if people are writing applications and applications are different than what they were in the past, the only reason you build a network is to run applications. And that network we built 10 years ago doesn't lend itself very well to those applications that are built on a component or modular basis. Really, really important premise that we're making as we build our value proposition for customers, okay? So this is all about east-west traffic, right? And as Gartner says, this traffic that's going to start moving between servers, it's really about an application requirement that's occurring here, okay? Applications are being built differently. Networks have to be built differently to support that. Everyone talks about the virtual enterprise. This is the end game, right? Building technologies to help enable the virtual enterprise. And for us, all that means is that companies can build IT infrastructure and deploy it anywhere. And primarily, you know, take advantage of IT infrastructures that live outside the data center as opposed to inside the data center. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to go through really what's an architectural construct that we call Cloudplex, okay? And Cloudplex is really our version of trying to build a framework and a reference point of when to build technologies and where to build technologies in the kind of continuum of our customers' requirements. And it's really consisting of three basic things: fabrics, an open architecture, and a global perspective, okay? So I'll go through each of these relatively quickly, and I really want to spend a little bit of time on the fabric side of things. So we believe that fabrics in general are an absolutely essential component to be able to really deploy this, you know, very virtualized cloud network. If you don't have fabrics within the environment, we don't believe that you're going to be able to deploy this really highly virtualized cloud network. And I'll show it to you, and I'll talk a little bit why. So you know, a lot of us probably know Brocade through our Fibre Channel SAN fabrics. And the reason I bring this up is not because I don't think you're going to sell Fibre Channel SAN fabrics for us necessarily, but just to give you a little context on who we are and why we think we've got a value proposition on the Ethernet side of things, okay? So fabrics, what are fabrics? So fabrics are deterministic, they're lossless, they're low latency, they're auto-configuring, they're self-healing. When I joined the company 12 years ago, we stood up on these soapboxes and we tried to explain to people why they should deploy this, you know, shared storage infrastructure to help solve problems around efficiencies and availability and operational simplicity, and basically deploy big reams of data within an environment. And it worked, right? So we're still here, still selling a lot of Fibre Channel gear. I was telling the executive team earlier this morning that we've never sold more fiber channel ports or gotten more revenue for fiber channel business of this, dying industry, this thing that's going to get taken over by the convergence world. It's not happening, guys. It's really the only, block level storage paradigm for protocols out there available right now. So we're selling tons and tons of fiber channel stuff. Our business is through the roof. The reason I bring it up, yeah?
What do you attribute that?
So yeah, what I attribute it to is virtualization. So, the math, you can argue with the math, but somewhere around 70% of every server that's in a virtualized environment is living on a SAN right now. So, it's kind of this balancing act, right? So, it's probably like a 10-to-1 servers versus storage ports that plug into a SAN. But, as things get more virtualized, they got to be connected. And if they got to be connected, they're probably sitting on a SAN already.
I was wondering if you were taking the internal file.
No.
Building that, or
Part of that. Now, I don't think it's a big enough driver right now for me to tell you that that's what's happening. It's more just virtualization, right? It's, think of when we sell a fiber channel switch, it's got ports, and those ports are getting eaten up by servers, right? So even though people are deploying less servers in a virtualized world, they have to be connected, so therefore they're going to connect through a SAN. So, I think what's happening in this world is, or the point I wanted to make on this whole slide, is that we know a lot about fabrics. We basically invented fabrics. So again, deterministic, lossless, low latency, auto-configuring, self-healing, automated fabrics, okay? And, a guy told me, a real smart guy told me once, he said, think about the difference between, fabrics and kind of standard Ethernet technology. One's kind of 10 or 15 years old, and the other's 30 or 40 years old. Probably a few things that are automated in there that aren't in the 30, 40-year-old technology. So we know a lot about this stuff. We know a lot about applications. We get exposed to a lot of virtualization components because of our background in fiber channel, okay? And I want to bring that up because really what I want to talk more about today is Ethernet fabric. So what is an Ethernet fabric? Well, it turns out that an Ethernet fabric is deterministic, it's lossless, it's low latency, it's auto-configuring, it's self-healing. You can manage it as one logical switch. It's a really, really elegant architecture, okay? But the big thing that an Ethernet fabric is it's a big, flat layer 2 network. So what does that mean, right? The technical guys in the room will kind of get it. Well, why is that important? Remember that east-west traffic that I talked about? East-west traffic lives within layer 2. Communication between servers lives within layer 2. Hypervisors don't like routed environments. Hypervisors like layer 2. So the bigger layer 2 network that you can provide for your environment, the more mobility you can provide within your virtualized environment, okay? It's a big, big deal. And that's why we fundamentally believe that if you're going to build a highly virtualized cloud network, you're going to have to do it with fabrics. And we tend to think that our fabrics are a little better than the next guys because we invented them. And they look, and they act, and they feel a lot like fiber channel fabrics, okay? That's it. I'm done. I mean, it's fundamentally, honestly, that is the value proposition that I provide to customers, right? When I go in and I talk to customers around why Brocade, and I'll talk a bit about some back end, you tell that story, they get it. And they get it because they believe in us, because the fabric technology is a real requirement for them. We're really seeing this. So, if you look at, again, staying with Ethernet fabrics, this is what we all built for the last 10 years. This 3-tier architecture. Doesn't look very east-west, does it? It looks a lot north-south, right? We built these big 3-tier architectures, and they're big, they're complex, they're inefficient, they're expensive. There's a lot of artificial boundaries within them, right? With subnets and VLANs and security zones. They're not very elegant, let's admit it, right? We all made lots of money selling them, but they're not exactly the most elegant thing in the world. When you run spanning tree, 40% of the ports go unused, waiting for a problem to happen, right? So what we're proposing is something a little different. Let's compress the tiers. Let's build a technology that doesn't have these underutilized ports. Let's again, build this deterministic multi-pathing so that every switch that you put in the network is alive and active as opposed to active-passive of spanning tree. It gets rid of spanning tree. It gets rid of the inefficiencies of not using ports. It gets rid of a lot of the complexities, okay? It's very, very elegant. So I have companies like Microsoft and Cerner and Fidelity and Dell IT and Morgan Stanley, and the name goes on and on and on, starting to deploy this technology now. The second element of CloudPlex, which again is this architectural framework for kind of guiding us through the cloud, is open. And this is a big discussion point, and I think it's particularly relevant for the channel. So before we build a product, right, and again, you got to look at our market share in the IP space, right? We're not the 70% share market. That's in the fiber channel stand, we're the 70% guy. We're less than that, let's just say, in the IP space, right? Considerably less. So our value proposition to customers is best in class, right? Our value proposition to customers, which I think is probably the message that the channel wants to bring too, right? You want to go in and be as independent as possible and say, what's the best solution for you to deliver to your customers? And that's what makes you a trusted advisor as opposed to me with a Brocade badge and saying, Brocade's the best way to go, right? That's your value proposition from my standpoint. The open side of things, a lot of companies talk about openness. They talk about being open standards, but they don't really do much about it. We don't build a product that doesn't assume it's going to live in a heterogeneous environment. Let me just say that one more time. We don't build a product that doesn't assume it's going to live in a heterogeneous environment. That costs a lot of money. It's a pain in the butt, right? But we have to do it because we're not going to go in and swoop out our competitors, every one of our competitors' ports. So every product that you see from us assumes that it's going to go and talk to something other than a Brocade switch. It could be a Juniper switch, it could be a Cisco switch, it could be an HP switch. We don't care. Open standards are a big, big deal. And I think where you're seeing it most relevant is in these vertical stacks, right? So you see a lot of these vertical stacks, and you probably sell some of these vertical stacks in the marketplace. And I get asked about the stacks a lot, saying, well, are you part of a vertical stack? I'm like, well, I don't have a server, so no, right? But our angle on this, and I think it's very valid, is vertical stacks can get to market faster, right? They're certified solutions, they check the box, and away they go. But a customer said this best to me. It was actually, who was it? It was Bank of America, actually. It was Bank of America about a month and a half ago. Really smart guy. And we were talking about vertical stacks, and he said, it's easy for us to order these vertical stacks. What about you guys? And I said, and he said to me, he said, but I get why you're not doing it. He says, because they're going to come out of the gate fast, and they're going to have this certified solution on it. He said, but the more mature the technology is within these vertical stacks, the less important it is for them to come from all one vendor, right? i.e., open standards. So if everybody's truly open, shouldn't customers really not care what server, what storage, what compute, what networking even, right? And certainly what hypervisor, which is the most interesting one I think is going to change here in the next few years. They shouldn't care. We don't care. Our value proposition on the stack is pick best-in-class product for you. Customers have a heterogeneous environment. They don't have just one server vendor. They don't have one storage vendor typically, right? They have one hypervisor vendor now, right? Which we all love, but that's not going to last either, right? Something's going to come out that's for free, that's 80% of the functionality, right? VMware is not going to dominate like this forever. You have to be prepared for that, right? VMware is a great partner of ours, so nothing on VMware. Their stuff is great, but that's just reality, guys. And I think that the industry has borne out over time that best-in-class wins over proprietary vertical stacks. It just does, right? It just does.